The Wespenra Papers. A Journey Through the Multiverse. The Second Level of Learning. http://wespenry.com. Prophecy Paper Number 2. The Closing of the Nanosecond. By Wespenra, Saturday, October 13, 2012. http://wespenry.com, Part 1. 1. Syrian preparation in modern time for the return of the gods, and their primary message that they come as liberators. Any people, who have heard about the Annunaki, think of Sitchin's translation of the Sumerian tablets as being the first indication in modern time that these beings actually existed, and still do. Interestingly enough, this is not the case. Several months ago, Michael Lee Hill pointed out to me that there is some old, channeled material from back in 1958 from the Annunaki. It was apparently channeled, and was posted in Flying Saucer Review magazine, November-December 1958, edited by editor/author Brinsley L. E. Power Trench. Here is the article in full, all emphases in original. We are already here, among you. Some of us have always been here, with you, yet apart from, watching, and occasionally guiding you whenever the opportunity arose. Now, however, our numbers have been increased in preparation for a further step in the development of your planet, a step of which you are not yet aware. We have been confused with the gods of many world religions, although we are not gods, but your fellow creatures, as you will learn directly before many more years have passed. You will find records of our presence in the mysterious symbols of ancient Egypt, where we made ourselves known in order to accomplish certain ends. Our principal symbol appears in the religious art of your present civilization and occupies a position of importance upon the Great Seal of your country. The United States of America. It has been preserved in certain secret societies founded originally to keep alive the knowledge of our existence and our intentions toward mankind. We have left you certain landmarks, placed carefully in different parts of the globe, but most prominently in Egypt, where we established our headquarters upon the occasion of our last overt, or, as you would say, public appearance. At that time the foundations of your present civilization were laid in the earth, and the most ancient of your known landmarks established by means that would appear as miraculous to you now as they did to the pre-Egyptians, so many thousands of years ago. Since that time the whole art of building, in stone, has become symbolic, to many of you, of the work in hand, the building of the human race towards its perfection. Your ancestors knew us in those days as preceptors and as friends. Now, through your own efforts, you have almost reached, in your majority, a new step on the long ladder of your liberation. You have been constantly aided by our watchful inspiration, and hindered only by the difficulties natural to your processes of physical and moral development. You have lately achieved the means of destroying yourselves. Do not be hasty in your self-congratulation. Yours is not the first civilization to have achieved and used such means. Yours will not be the first civilization to be offered the means of preventing that destruction and proceeding, in the full glory of its accumulated knowledge, to establish an era of enlightenment upon the earth. However, if you do accept the means offered you, and if you establish such a millennium upon the basis of your present accomplishments, yours will be the first civilization to do so. Always before, the knowledge, the techniques, the instructions, have become the possessions of a chosen few. A few chose themselves by their own open-minded and clear-sighted realization of the shape of things to come. They endeavored to pass on their knowledge in the best possible form, and by the most enduring means at their command. In a sense they succeeded, but in another sense their failure equaled their success. Human acceptance is, to a very large extent, measurable by human experience. Succeeding generations, who never knew our actual presence, translated the teachings of their elders in the terms of their own experience. For instance, a cross-sectional drawing, much simplified and stylized by many copyings, of one of our traveling machines became the Eye of Horus, and then other eyes of other gods. Finally, the ancient symbol that was once an accurate representation of an important mechanical device has been given surprising connotations by the modern priesthood of psychology. The important fact is, however, that we are here, among you, and that you, as a world race, will know it before very much longer. The time is almost ripe, but, as with all ripening things, the process may not be hurried artificially without danger of damaging the fruit. There is a right time for every action, and the right time for our revelation of ourselves to your era is approaching. Some of you have seen our advanced guard already. You have met us often in the streets of your cities, and you have not noticed us. But when we flash through your skies in the ancient traditional vehicles Vimanas, see Exhibit 14, this paper GJ, you are amazed, and those of you who open your mouths and tell of what you have seen are accounted dupes and fools. Actually you are prophets, seers in the true sense of the word. You in Kansas and Oklahoma, you in Oregon and in California, and Idaho, you know what you have seen. Do not be dismayed by meteorologists. Their business is the weather. One of you says, I saw a torpedo-shaped object. Others report, disc-like objects, some of you say spherical objects, or platter-like objects. You are all reporting correctly and accurately what you saw, and in most cases you are describing the same sort of vehicle. Now that the art of manufacturing plastic materials has reached a certain perfection among you, perhaps you can imagine a material, almost transparent to the rays of ordinary visible light, yet strong enough to endure the stresses of extremely rapid flight. Look again at the great nebulae, and think of the construction of your own galaxy, and behold the universal examples of what we have found to be the perfect shape for an object which is to travel through what you still fondly refer to as empty space. In the center of the discus, gyroscopically controlled within a central sphere of the same transparent material, our control rooms revolve freely, accommodating themselves and us to flat or edgewise flight. Both methods are suited to your atmosphere, and when we convert abruptly from one to the other, as we are sometimes obliged to do, and you are watching, our machines seem suddenly to appear or to disappear. At our possible speeds your eyes, untrained and unprepared for the maneuver, do make mistakes, but not the mistakes your scientists so often accuse them of making. We pass over your hilltops in horizontal flight. You see and report a torpedo-shaped object. We pass over, in formation, flying vertically edge-on. Or we go over at night, jet slits glowing, and you see an orange disk. In any event you see us, and in any event we do not care. If we chose to remain invisible, we could do so, easily, and, in fact, we have done so almost without exception for hundreds of years. But you must become accustomed to our shapes in your skies, for one day they will be familiar, friendly, and reassuring sights. This time, it is to be hoped that the memory of them, passed on to your children and their children, will be clear and precise. That you will not cause them to forget, as your ancestors forgot, the meaning of the diagrams and the instructions we will leave with you. If you do fail, as other civilizations have failed, we will see your descendants wearing wiring diagrams for simple machines as amulets, expecting the diagrams to do what their forefathers were taught the completed article would accomplish. Then their children, forgetting even that much or little would preserve the amulet as a general protective device or as an intellectual curiosity or perhaps as a religious symbol. Such is the cycle of forgetfulness. The Annunaki. According to Trench, the editor/author and publisher of the Novdis 1958 issue, the original article was found in the November 1947 issue of Fantastic Stories, USA, written by a pseudonym, Alexander Blade. Remarkably enough, after 54 years, the Flying Saucer Review magazine is still being published, or was at least in 2010, but I have not been able to find it online. Also, 1947 triggers memories in the mass consciousness from the UFO crash in Roswell, New Mexico. So, the Syrians have, and they apparently admitted to this in 1947, been around since ancient time, and just like I've said, never left. Interesting in this article is that they at that time gave us hints of what is to come. They are talking about our liberation, and that they will be a part of that. I've talked about this earlier, saying that everything fits perfectly into their great plan, and prophecy in particular. This group preceded Sitchin, who then became the next step in preparing mankind for the return of the gods. 9 years later, a young boy and his dad were out fishing when they both suddenly supposedly got abducted by aliens who presented themselves as the A.am.I. This young boy of 10 years old was Drive A.R. Borden. We all know now that he, too, was being prepared to spread a message to mankind, although not until about 50 years later, in 2007, when his essay, The Link, was published on the internet. In between these events we have Sitchin publishing his books, starting in 1976, and continuing more or less until his death in 2010. Inspired by Sitchin's work, many others have followed and spread the word, and now I'm doing the same thing, although on my own terms. Then, in the early 1980s, the newspapers posted their article on the incoming for the first time. In 1998, the Wingmakers site launched, and eventually SAALM and LPGC got their voices heard. Both Wingmakers and LPGC talked about the same time frame. LPGC mentioned Nibiru's return in about 2065 to 2080, while in the Wingmakers material, 2065 to 2080 corresponds with the time frame we're going to discover the Grand Portal, which will set us free. It is when all of mankind will realize that they are one and part of something bigger, the Oversoul, in simplistic terms, by the Wingmakers called Sovereign Integral. 2. A Pleiadian perspective on the return of the Syrians. Barbara Marciniak's Pleiadians warned us about the Lizzies, the Syrians, already back in 1988 and have done so ever since. They tell a similar story, that the invaders came here 500,000 plus years ago for the first time, and after many experiments they finally created Homo sapiens. However, they also tell about the goddess to a certain extent, although the Pleiadians are not the source that made me look into the divine feminine, neither was Morning Sky, and how the founders, they call them original planners or game makers, came here long before the Syrians and created a paradise on earth, and that the first human was androgynous. But about 500,000 years ago, when there was a lot of alien activity here on earth, the Lizzies, a play on the word lizard people, there was a war in space outside Earth and darkness won over light. The original planners had to leave, but they always have had an eye on Earth and the living library from there on. The Lizzies took over most of the planet and created Homo sapiens as a slave race. The Pleiadians don't say straight out that the Syrians have been here on Earth all the way up to modern time, but when asked during the channeled Q&A sessions, they say that some of them are here now. They are also saying that the gods are returning. They have also lately been referring to a unifying event which could possibly happen this year, which will help humanity come together in some common goal. Exactly what this unifying event might be they are not telling us, they just say that they are not totally sure themselves. The reason for this is the following. All metaphysical entities who people are channeling have one thing in common, and that's how they read energy. First of all they read the energy of their vehicle, human body host, and all his or her memories in their lifetime and in their past lives. Then they read the energies of the mass consciousness, which is that of the whole human soul group. And lastly, they look at astrological charts to see probable outcomes. With all these tools, they can with some certainty predict future outcomes, or rather what most possibly will happen. This doesn't mean that they can tell exactly what it is they are reading in all those energy sources, but they get a feeling of in which direction things are heading, unless mankind as a soul group change their minds and go in a totally different direction, which they say happens. Humans are very unpredictable, which is a good thing, and sometimes hard to read. So, the closer in time the prediction is, the more chance of accuracy. This is also one of the reasons why the messages from the channels are wrong on occasion. However, a good metaphysical source doesn't normally give you dates. If they do, be alert, because they are almost certainly deceptive. I have been wondering if this unifying event could possibly be the return of the gods, and if it will happen in late 2012, but I have no way to tell. It could also be a few years into the future. Although, AR and LPGC claim that Nibiru is returning in December this year and that he and a group of people are currently working to steer the planet off course by following the instructions in the 2 essays I gave the reader in the previous paper. He, and one of the participants, which happens to be Michael Lee Hill, both say that they managed to steer Nibiru out of orbit with something like 1 degree, which sounds like nothing, but is fairly significant. Still, they say, it's not enough, and the work continues. Whether there is any validity to this or not, I let future tell. I am not giving too much credit to the wing makers at this time, but neither James, nor the Pleiadians, can see any threat from an incoming planetary body at this time. If this means that A.M.E is still coming in but is not going to be a threat, or if there is no planet coming in at the moment, I don't know. It's up for interpretation. I am, as the reader knows, of the opinion, based on my research, that the Sirians are still in Sirius, and Nibiru/A.M.E is not the home planet of the Sirian overlords. Something has apparently been spotted on the fridges of the solar system for a while, even reports from people working at NASA have said so, but unless it's a natural body, unrelated to our story here, or if it's a Sirian hollowed-out planet/spaceship is impossible to say with some certainty at this time. The Pleiadians, just like tons of other sources, are telling us that the Middle East is very important for the Sirians who are on the planet, and for those who are coming in. The Pleiadians, the P, say that the ones who are here are living underground and have a big base in the Middle East, and that this is what the unrest in the area is mostly about. The fight over real estate between the Palestinians and the Israelis is just a front. The real fight is over the Stargate, so there the P-DEF and LPGC are in agreement. The main reason the P are mentioning this Stargate as being important is because it's the main entrance to our planet and the corridor of time which leads to our own present timeline. In an interview with Barbara Marciniak from 1996, which can still be found on YouTube she is mentioning the gods who were once creating us and that they, too, need healing, and because they are connected with us, they may need us for their own spiritual progress. In other words, we may have to heal together. However, in a recent lecture from earlier this year, they are saying that the gods are returning, but they are deceptive. Just like I said already in Level I back in 2011, they tell us that when the gods come, we should resolve it by asking for the greatest outcome possible to be the result of it, and then just leave it, and not get involved with any of their business. Our greatest advantage, and I agree with the P, is our rays of consciousness. They cannot take us over with consciousness, only with machines. In the previous paper I gave the analogy about the scratch in the DVD. I believe we have already passed the moment of awareness required for us to break the time loop, but that doesn't mean the game is over and we can relax. The next track on the DVD will most certainly make mankind multi-D if we let ourselves, or rather those who don't let themselves be seduced, will. The rest, unfortunately, will vote for another path where machines and nanotechnology will take over, and those who choose that route will not end up in a good place if I put it mildly. In the next paper we will talk about some quite possible consequences from the choices we have to make right now and in the next few years. The P also go on telling us that the global elite believe that the gods will return, and old stories and legends say that they will, the PTB are preparing for it. Some are thrilled, their masters are coming to see them face to face, while others are pretty nervous and don't want it to happen. The Pleiadian group stresses that the capacities of the gods go far beyond coming here with a big armada of spaceships. They don't need that, they don't even need stargates, they say. That's primitive. They can come through black holes small as a pinprick that are now accelerating around the Earth. Whirlwinds, tornadoes, and other weather phenomena open up such many black holes, which are basically small portals or time warps. In ancient time, gods used to use the sun as a stargate, but that's not needed anymore. Figuratively speaking, they could come through flurries or mini black holes in our backyards. 3. One-on-one with Prince U2 Shamash. Those who have followed my work, in addition to just reading my papers, know that I had an encounter with U2 Shamash, King Nanner's son, and Lord Enlil's grandson, almost exactly a year ago. He unwittingly confirmed what the Pleiadians are saying, that these beings are still deceptive and are coming to invade rather than to liberate, although they are trying to give us a different impression. But first, let me start with telling the reader how my connection with you two started. Shortly after I had released the first level of learning, level I got an email that stood out from all the rest of the tons of emails I usually get. It said the sender's name was U2 Shamash. And I thought, this must be a joke. So I opened the email, and sure enough, someone who claimed to be the old Syrian god had written a fairly long email to me. I was very skeptical at first, but read it through all the way. The message itself seemed authentic enough, but could of course have hypothetically been written by someone else. I read it through again, this time much more carefully, word by word, and found something peculiar which had also struck me during the first read-through. Even more so this time, though. Although the letter was in English, and quite impeccably so, it had a writing style that was very odd. I have never seen anybody write like that. It's hard to explain without posting the letter, which I can't do out of respect, but the best way I can explain it is that the choice of words, and the way of making sentences, hinted at that he had translated the message in his head from another language into English. I can notice this thing more easily, perhaps, than someone whose first language is English, because English is my second language as well. I made the same kind of mistakes as you two did when I was relatively new to the language, and sometimes I still do. It has to do with certain phrases that are native to Swedish, and when that is transferred to English it's still understandable for an American or Englishman, but it's not the way it's normally said in an English-speaking country. I found that you two did the same thing, although I'd never seen this kind of phrasing before. That, and the whole tone of the letter made me wonder if it could be authentic after all. I was still skeptic, however. Next thing I did was to forward the email to Dr. A.R. Borden, whom after a while got back to me and said it indeed was you two who had written to me. A.R. had already told me a couple of months before that Ningish Zita, Thoth, who was born here on Earth a long time ago, and had been the A.am.I ambassador to Earth until recently, had passed away here on Earth for unknown reason. I know they can jump bodies, but it sounded on AR that it was time to change ambassadors, and a new ambassador had to be nominated by the A.am.I king. AR told me this more as a by the way, embedded into a lot of other things we were discussing at the time. Now, when I'd sent the email to AR, he told me that U2 Shamash was the new ambassador to Earth, and he had arrived here on the planet quite recently. LPGC already knew him from the annual Link meetings, where these human scientists meet with ET representatives from different star systems once, sometimes twice, a year. So it was not surprising that LPGC was the organization U2 got in touch with as one of the first things when he came here. Also, according to AR, some A.am.I who had preceded U2 in arriving here, including some A.am.I/human hybrids of the first generation, had been captured and tortured by the A.am.I rebel group, amongst LPGC called the Earthbound. Eventually, these A.am.I had managed to flee, and LPGC took care of them and hid them in a cave somewhere in South America. One of U2's first tasks was to take care of these ex-prisoners and send them back to A.am.I. LPGC, however, didn't have the resources to make the living standards acceptable for the A.am.I refugees, and U2 found them in quite a bad shape. He was not happy with AR and LPGC, according AR himself. Anyway, after had got them back in shape, they were sent back to a platform in space, Red Spaceship, somewhere in the solar system, for later transportation back to A.am.I. When that mission was completed, U2 apparently asked AR if there were any A.am.I friendly humans he could get in touch with, because he had a message from the king, who wanted it posted and spread as broadly as possible. AR told him that there are not many humans who know the true story and therefore would post such a message, but he mentioned a few names and Wes Penra was one of them. Then LPGC helped U2 setting up a human computer and gave him an email address. They also had to tell him how human computers work. Although U2 knew the concept of human computers since earlier, he had never had to study the mechanics of it. AR said U2 was a little rusty with it at first, but learned quickly. And that was another thing I noticed with U2's email: he didn't headline the email, and he didn't format the message the way a human normally does. It was kind of awkward in that way. He changed fonts and formatting in the middle of a message. So U2 browsed the internet and read some of the websites AR had recommended, and when he saw my level he obviously decided that I was the person he wanted to pick first. Therefore, the purpose of the first email he sent me was for me to post the message from his father, the king of A.am.e. The tone in the email was pretty businesslike and quite to the point. He told me who he was, and that he found my website surprisingly accurate when comes to describing the A.am.I. Hence, this was the reason he had chosen me to post the message from the king. There was an authority to the whole email, and he never asked me if I wanted to post it or not. It was more like a statement, such as "this is what you need to do." So before I replied, I sent it to AR, who confirmed its authenticity. I told him I wanted to respond to U2, but AR strongly suggested against it. He said that he'll take care of it, because I was at that time pretty new to LPGC and the whole A.am.I subject, and a message like this from U2 should probably be handled by LPGC. He said he'd take care of it and that I could let it go. He would let me know how things progressed. He told me he'd get back to me later, because he needed to take a nap, after had just returned from South America, and he was deadly tired. So we ended our conversation with that. Then I was sitting there before my computer, thinking this whole thing over, pondering what I should do. I was wondering why Shamash had contacted me of all people, but realized that there certainly are not many people who would be willing to post his message for various reasons. I decided to go against A.R's suggestion and wrote a reply to U2, whereafter I sent it. Before I tell the reader what I said, here is the message the king wanted me to publish. Let it be known by one and all. The work done by Mr. Penra is surprisingly accurate regarding Sam and its inhabitants. Sams are not invading the planet. Sams are returning to what once was a planet they inhabited in greater numbers than human, until humans began to outnumber Sams. This asymmetry continues today. Those Sams who returned and those who stayed behind are subject to the king, but reject royal authority and stand against the kingdom as enemies in kind and in fact. This will be realigned properly on return, and those who stand with them will be eliminated as pawns and as proxies, which is what they are, in hopes that the power and position now held will continue with the victory of their patrons. Nothing is further from the naked truth. Anything that is held to the contrary is contrived, dishonest, selfing and likely the work of proxies. Believe them not, for everyone will be held contemptible by the beliefs held and by the heart that beats in their chests, this by the word of the king, my father. Sam is near. It will shine in the southern half first and then appear to the rest of Ki in a sixth of a royal set. The royal set is the number of the king. Sam will be red in color. Much is already known and anticipated. Much more will be disclosed and known about Sam by Sams already here. Truth will be known. Believe what you must and be responsible for what you believe, but get information from oracles, not from anyone else. Byth Christui Arion. Furthermore, U2 told me, like the king says in the beginning of this email, that they are not here to invade, and humans will not be killed unless they work for those who returned, and those who stayed behind. As the reader can see, he is also talking about proxies. U2 explained that this means that anyone who works for the earthbound A.am.I, whether it is the global elite or any politician, CEO or whomever, wittingly or unwittingly, will be killed. This was unacceptable for me, because I could see the consequences. If these people come down here full force to kill off the global elite and anyone who works for them on proxy, it would trigger the Battle of Armageddon. World leaders, who just about all of them work within the global elite hierarchy, would freak out and take the only action that is logical under such a circumstance. They would gather the people in their country into one big army, saying that we are invaded by aliens, and that we now need to forget all our disagreements and fight this big enemy. Most nations would do the same thing. Then there would be rebel groups in each country who don't believe their leader, and they would go against their own countrymen. Some of them would even join the aliens, thinking that it would be great if their king, president, queen, or whomever would be killed by ETs. They would, in other words, buy the ET propaganda. So we would have a world war, fought on several fronts, and man would turn against man, just like the Bible says. I can also see how they could use Project Blue Beam, or similar, to simply holographically stage an invasion with spaceships, laser beams, and the whole science fiction stuff. Then the real invasion would happen in the Nano world, here referring to the spirit world or other dimensions. The Syrians would possess bodies from bloodlines they have specifically bred, and perhaps some of those special bloodlines would also include what would seem like regular bloodlines, like people on the street, although we don't know about it. Hence, all the alien abductions. This means the Syrians could possess far more bodies than we think at this moment. Others could, using their avatars or hybrid space-faring bodies, could manifest themselves as dragons, reptilians, greys, and even demons, although real demons have already been evoked, so faking them may not even be necessary. As the reader can see, we now have the whole end-time scenario with monstrous beings coming up from the pits of hell to kill off humans. The war would be devastating. So I emailed YouTube back and told him I would post the message from his king, but under certain premises. I told him that I did not agree with their plan and that I can't see how they could be perceived as a peace force if they come here to kill, and I told him about the above scenario, which I feel is going to be played out if they come. I sent it off and BCC'd AR. AR got back to me perhaps an hour later. He said, "Wow, this should be interesting." And he said that he happens to agree with me on the statement I sent back to YouTube, but would have preferred that I remain silent at this point in time. A day later or so, I got a reply from YouTube. He was not very happy and started talking about that one day, we Lulus would understand that we are all one and come from the same creator, and we need to get along. I totally understood that, of course, but could also see that the time was not right. On our mutual timeline, we will not experience mutual healing until they stop acting like warlords, and we humans wake up from our deep slumber. In the meantime, we humans have to heal our own timelines as we wake up. However, after some lecturing, he said that he had passed my message on to his father. Because I'd BCC'd AR, he got back to me pretty quickly and said that you two apparently took me seriously and had taken the message all the way back to the king for approval. I could tell AR seemed quite thrilled. I didn't know what would come out of it, and was not sure if what I had started would be of any consequence at all. Next email from you two was an approval from the king to let me post his message on my blog with my additional note to it, so I did, and here is the message I published, in its entirety. Authentic message from the king of the Annunaki, please read. Note from the editor, first of all, this is an authentic message. I was contacted yesterday by U2 Shamash, http://en.wikipedia.org/wiki/Shamash right parenthesis comma who is the son of King Nano of Nibiru, and brother of Inanna. He has returned to Earth with a message from his king to put on what the king considers friendly websites. U2 found my papers at http://westbenread.com and found them surprisingly accurate regarding a.me. Nibiru, and a.me. The Nibiruan people. He emailed me and asked for a service. His king wanted me to post the following statement here on my blog. I agreed to post the message U2 brought down to Earth, but said I want to put a note along with it to give the citizens of Earth, a heads up. He took my message to King Nano, who agreed I could do that. So therefore I want to say the following. The a.me, better known as the Annunaki, are returning. They say they want no harm to be done to us Lulus, humans, they say they owe us and want our forgiveness for what happened in the past. To understand this you really need to read my papers at westbenread.com, or Zachariah Sitchin's books. The way to do this is to come down to Earth and fight the Annunaki who are stationed on Earth since millennia, those who followed Marduk in his rebellion against the A.A.Me kingdom. Marduk and his cohorts have ever since been pulling the strings of most of the global elite, and the A.A.Me are returning to Earth to take care of business, overthrowing both the disloyal Annunaki and the human global elite, by some called the Illuminati. http://illuminati-news.com. We don't want history to repeat itself. I do not want humans to take sides in this upcoming battle of the gods and once again be used as cannon fodder and foot soldiers in their war. They say they come as liberators, but they do not come in peace. So humans, whatever you do if you want to change history and follow a more enlightened path, stay out of this conflict. Do not take sides and do not fight in their war. This is their conflict. We can't stop them from coming, but we can step aside and let them do their thing without interfering. We are tired of fighting wars, and don't let corrupt government leaders manipulate you into thinking we need to go to war against this invader force. The governments, the global elite, are only using us because they think we're fearful and stupid. Show that we Lulus have grown up and are a species of peace. Let everybody outside this planet learn that we are a peaceful race. Let A.A.Me take care of their own and the global elite, and we'll go from there. I have had 2 long correspondences with you two so far, and I know that this is the real deal. Laugh at it if you must, but take it seriously if you are smart. Personally, I am known for being in a good mood, making jokes even in the most serious situations. However, now our future depends on how you read this email, and I'm deadly serious. However, don't be afraid. They say they come to bring peace, and as liberators, perhaps, but their minds are still on war, and that is in conflict with my own mindset, at least. Let our hearts work now, more so than our heads. Be one in spirit through these events and we will come out on the other end, hopefully as intact as possible. Let them fight their wars, it's their karma, and we are released from ours by not participating. Maybe one day we can unite with the A.A.Mi, live together and visit each other's worlds in peace. Still, they set the stage with their arrival, showing us what their real imperatives are. Will the result of their visit to Key be real peace and unity, or war and separation? We shall see. We Lulus are ready for peace and unity as a species, let it therefore be a guideline for the incoming. They will show us who they are by example. Have they changed since ancient times, or is history repeating itself? That's what we have to look at. Let's see how this pans out and let's go from there. Love. Wes. Here beneath is the message to all humankind, from King Nano of Nibiru. Sam is short for A.A.Me. Nibiru and A.A.Me. The inhabitants of Nibiru. Let it be known by one and all. The work done by Mr. Penra is surprisingly accurate regarding Sam and its inhabitants. Sams are not invading the planet. Sams are returning to what once was a planet they inhabited in greater numbers than human, until humans began to outnumber Sams. This asymmetry continues today. Those Sams who returned and those who stayed behind are subject to the king, but reject royal authority and stand against the kingdom as enemies in kind and in fact. This will be realigned properly on return, and those who stand with them will be eliminated as pawns and as proxies, which is what they are, in hopes that the power and position now held will continue with the victory of their patrons. Nothing is further from the naked truth. Anything that is held to the contrary is contrived, dishonest, selfing and likely the work of proxies. Believe them not, for everyone will be held contemptible by the beliefs held and by the heart that beats in their chests, this by the word of the king, my father. Sam is near. It will shine in the southern half first and then appear to the rest of Key in a sixth of a royal set. The royal set is the number of the king. Sam will be red in color. Much is already known and anticipated. Much more will be disclosed and known about Sam by Sams already here. Truth will be known. Believe what you must and be responsible for what you believe, but get information from oracles, not from anyone else. Bith Christui Arion 6. After that, I stopped hearing from you two. The only thing I heard on the matter was from AR, who is working in a close connection with Shamash these days, and he said that when you two saw the picture of me on my website, it's not the same picture I have up now. He thought I looked like a friend of his. I felt like he wanted me to feel that I am one of them, which I am definitely not. I asked you two what he wanted me to call him, Lord you two? He replied, you two, just you two. Lord is a title you earn and you're not there yet. Maybe one day. And that is another thing which indicates that he is genuine, because I've learned elsewhere that Lord is something they call each other, and only if they have done something significant to enhance the Syrian community. The next step down in brother. If someone is called a brother, it's the equivalence to a good friend. Lastly, is there any chance that the message from you two Shamash to me can be fake? Could his emails have been written by someone who is not who he says he is? Of course, that is always an option. The only real confirmation I have that the emails are authentic comes from AR Borden, whom I trusted quite a bit at the time. Now, since he is working very close with you two, from what he says, I am not so enthusiastic about his intentions anymore. A few people have suggested that the emails were actually written by AR, but there are a few things that contradict that. The first thing is the writing style, and this is more evident in the other emails from you two. Although it is hypothetically possible that AR could have faked it himself, I don't feel that's the case. Someone else from LPGC? Possibly, but again, the writing style is very unique. Secondly, why would AR tell me to leave it alone, let him take care of it, and having me stay out of the loop? If it's a fake, and AR is behind it somehow, wouldn't he tell me to go on and reply to you two? Instead he does the opposite. It was my own decision to go against A.R's advice and write you two back. And when AR read my reply, he actually seemed genuinely shocked and a little concerned about me. Whatever people say about AR, he has showed that he genuinely cares about me and personally likes me. There are others, however, whom I thought were my allies in this time of awakening, who cut off all communication with me when they saw that I'd posted you two's message. They didn't want to have anything to do with me until I remove it from the internet. It's still on the internet a year later, and those who cut me off have so far kept their word, no communication. Other than A.R's confirmation, I have no solid evidence that the emails came from you two. But now, 12 months later, it still feels like they are as genuine as ever, although there is always a chance I may be wrong. However, I feel I am as certain of their authenticity as I possibly can be. Either way, they fit right into the agenda I know the Syrians have. The invasion is at least one of the plans on their table. Also, I have enough strong sources saying that the gods are returning and that they are bad news, and some of them are already here. So why would it be so strange if I actually had a genuine communication with you two Shamash?